Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect within their affinity groups. And we talk to former collegiate professional athletes about their transition out of sports into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And it's such a major issue today between mental health and financial literacy. And we're so excited today to actually have an expert. I mean, when I talk about expert, I mean, there's, everybody has their story, but Jay Dixon, he has written books on all that, which we're real excited to get into all that. So how you doing today, Jay?
Hey, Rob, thanks. Thanks for having me. I don't know if expert's the right word, but I'll take it. I'll take it from you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So Jay played football at University of Nevada, and then afterwards had a rough patch at it. And I guess that might be putting it mildly. And Jay will kind of talk a little bit about that. Ultimately, he got himself into the corporate world, into asset management, but decided to get that athlete skill set that we all talk about and get into entrepreneurship. And has had a very successful career, built an HVAC company and then a bunch of other companies afterwards, getting to merger and acquisition. So kind of an entrepreneur now and business leader. And we really want to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So Jay, let's talk about growing up. When you playing sports growing up, how did that shape you leading up into college?
Yeah, I was a middle child. And that's at 7, 8 years old. I watched my brother, my older brother out there playing football. And I decided that was something I wanted to do. And so, following the older brother going out there and putting on the helmet and having that camaraderie and the teammates and the strategy and, the physicality. It was something that really sunk into my soul right away. And it was something that I took, and I would say, maybe middle school is when I said, I really want to play college football. I really want to play college football. So that became a goal about middle school. And at that time, when I was playing, back when I was playing, there was a lot of that, be an expert at one sport was kind of the common theme amongst the athletic community. So I was, a multi-sport athlete, and I ended up in high school taking away baseball, taking away basketball, and I just focused on football and did a little track and field and shot put, and then was able to achieve that goal of playing Division I football. But I would say, really from a young age, it was that exposure. I'm just glad I got exposed to it, and it gave me a goal, and it gave me, dreams to achieve. So the game for me at a young age, Rob, I would say was really the biggest thing it did for me was inspire and gave me new thoughts and new ideas and new things to chase. So
That's great. And then, so did you dream about being a professional athlete? And you kind of alluded to, was it in football only, or did you want to be a baseball player? What was your what was your dream?
Oh yeah. I grew up in Orange County, California, and my parents were diehard Angel fans. The California Angels back when I was growing up. And so we would always go to Angel games growing up. And then, the Rams ended up leaving. And so we didn't really have much of a professional team and football wise. So baseball was the thing. And I can remember, a time when I was sitting there with my mom and dad. And I remember I think it was my mom saying something to me. And an announcer had said something, here comes John, blah, 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 up to the plate. And she said something like, I can see that being Jay Dixon one day. And I remember that. And I was like, this is going to be so cool. What a great life. And so, yeah, it became something that I wanted to achieve at a young age. I think it was, more professional. But then as I honed in on football, that became, obviously I wanted to be the pinnacle of that, like many athletes do. Right. So then it kind of honed into professional, and then it, got into football, and from there, that became a goal.
Yeah, I always joke around and say I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, which I did, but the talent wasn't there, so now I do podcasts.
Yeah, there's a lot of ingredients to sports. Talent's one of them.
Yeah, I had the drive. I just didn't have the talent. I was a runner. I ran cross country and track in high school and college. So let's talk about networking and connecting. So you're in college and you're playing sports and all that. Talk about the importance of doing it, especially when you're playing.
Yeah, networking and connecting when you're playing, I think it does a really great job in athletics of teaching you the art and skill of networking as you get into the business world. And I think it's something a lot of people don't recognize at a younger age or when they're playing that it's what you do when other people aren't looking that really drives that trust and brings that trust in. So for me, playing football, the way to network and develop trust and really have a deep bond with someone is when you would, they knew they could rely on me. They knew I was someone that would show up every day. They knew on tape I was trying my hardest. I was out there on the field, and I think as I look at networking in the business world, a lot of it comes down to trust, right? You can go out and you can network and you can, here in New York City, people go out to dinners and have drinks and all that. But really, the art and skill of networking is developing that trust. So I think, back to your question, when you go back to sports and what you're doing, that networking is uber important. It's important for those athletes as they're playing the sport. It's important for the team, but really as they come out of the sports, it's important to realize that some of those actions and some of the ways they would connect with those folks while playing the game are really applicable after sports. So um, you know long story short, I would say um, networking is one of those things that it doesn't pay off right away, but it always pays off in the long run. And so even for me, being 15, 16 years out of sports, I still have some of my teammates that I'm so close with that if they ever needed anything or they're in business, we've tried to do business together and do stuff like that. It's just there's a trust mechanism when you're doing business, and it makes life so much easier. So
Yeah, I agree, and I think trust is the key there for sure. And I think and to kind of allude, just you're building a relationship. I think the more you have a relationship, I mean, when we talk about networking, connecting, a lot of times I'm kind of giving advice on it, just say that kind of have that spirit of giving, because a lot of times kind of approach it more about like what can I do to help you versus what can you do to help me. And I think as you build that trust and that relationship, it's going to go hand in hand together. And I know I've had some conversation with agents, and they've said the best time connecting and networking is when they're playing because they're more relevant. So like, here's the perfect time: you're playing, people know who you are, and then all of a sudden, when you're done, like some of these athletes, like if they didn't do it, they're kind of like, okay, well, I'm ready. What's next? And like, okay, well, you really didn't build that up. And we even talk about too. Even going back to high school. I mean, you've got your teammates, you got their parents, you got like coaches. I mean, we definitely encourage everybody, athletes, and and everybody in general, just to utilize those contexts and start building those relationships.
yeah, no, absolutely. And you think about some of those. If you have some of that name, image, likeness, you're a bigger player. It is incredibly important to network even with outside of your industry, right? Or outside of your team while you're playing. You're 100% right. And build that identity map and that network as big as you can. So those things will serve you the rest of your career.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about yeah, obviously to us Alumni Direct, alumni engagement is really important. So when you were at Nevada, was the school trying to bring athletes back and to not just for the homecoming games or like a golf tournament, but trying to bring them back to work with the current athletes and mentor them and all that?
So I finished playing in 2007 was my last season. And I can't speak specifically for Nevada, but I can speak specifically, I guess more generally in that ecosystem there. Coming out of sports, I think at that time, and this is just, from a lot of friends that have played at a high level that are about my age, the transition formula was really that. It was come back to alumni games, come back to networking events, and come back to games. Meet alumni, come to networking events and stuff like that. So at that time, that was really the transition. I don't know today if that's expanded beyond, but I do know in the general general athletic world, it's starting to be talked about a lot more. So it's changed a bit.
Yeah, I think yeah, to your point, I mean it's all timing. I think current now, I think more schools and some of these other podcast guests I've talked about, not necessarily when they played like you, but like now there's more engagement with schools are realizing. I mean, because with the athletic departments, I mean, not only do you have your current athletes, but you got all your alumni athletes as well. And I think a lot of times the alumni athletes tend to get forgotten. And so it's important to have programs in place. And I think the current athletes especially are looking up to these alumni athletes that are already in their shoes. But I think the same thing even with alumni athletes, they still they see, okay, well, here's Jay, he's successful in the business world. I can maybe do the same thing, and maybe Jay can help me.
Yeah, what I'm curious. Here's a theory for you. Potentially with the NIL and all these collectives, it may speed up those transition services as well, as the alumni become even more important, right? To fund their collectives and to really be involved at that university. So it may be something that there may be a positive there, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, because I've talked to some guys. Like one guy was saying that he would just love to get, he wants to get together with all his former players, like maybe a 10-year span, play some flag football, and just there's just communication gaps and issues with that. So I think from the school's perspective, they just need to maybe it's a two-way street. Obviously, I mean the athlete has to want to come back too, but I think
Yeah.
the schools need to engage more. Like I was on a conversation with one athletic department, and they were just saying that they don't do a very good job in the mentoring space. And one of the other people who was online with me, he was a former alumni from that school, a Hall of Fame player from the school. He was an NFL player, and he kind of said, "Look, I'm here. Tap me." Like
Yeah.
like you utilize me. So
are transition services a school responsibility, or should that be whatever that governing body's responsibility? If it's the NCAA, or should it be at the individual school level?
I think
Right now they're responsible. I'm sorry, they're responsible right until that last day.
yeah, I would say. I mean, I think it should be both. And I mean, and honestly, like we've talked a little bit about going into schools' athletic departments, and this will be a good segue into my next question to you. But we've talked about going in with like people like financial advisors, mental health, maybe sales and marketing people, could be career service people, but a team of experts that can help schools to, I guess, provide additional curriculum. Like one guy I talked to, he graduated, went to school, University of Buffalo, and he said, "I really wish that." He was a football player. He goes, "I really wish that the school would have had a 4-week workshop or maybe a class that was mandatory to take." And I mean, and granted, and because you went through it. I mean, the amount of time or little time that you had. I mean, you're focusing on your sport, but it's really important when they're done with their current athletes. But again, reaching out to the alumni athletes. So I've talked
Yeah.
about this a couple of times where imagine, so you're a parent, you've got a high school athlete, and they're getting ready to go, and you're looking at 5 different schools, very similar in what they're going to offer your student athlete. But if you knew that one of those schools was going to have curriculum or a program that would not only help them while they're there, ultimately in their transition out of sports, but would also, in a sense, care for that alumni who's maybe been out 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but they're still struggling. They can utilize that help as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a noble way to approach it. I do think there's so much inequity across the country between these universities that it's almost, this is a conversation itself with the NIL as a whole, but the equity and the transition services as well.
Yeah, it's hard. I guess to your point, I guess if it was something that was like, say, NCAA governed, maybe it might be a little bit different versus like every school wanted to kind of, do what they want to do. But I mean, ultimately, I guess it kind of answered my question too, because, I usually ask like, were there things in place when you were in school? And if not, then are you seeing it today? Like, specific to Nevada or like you said, other schools?
Yeah. I do see it at other schools. I see the inequities as far as the number of staff in the athletic departments and the athletic academic departments and the amount of time and services that they can offer. As far as post game, I do know there are, some universities that have some transition services. They even have programs aligned towards that. So it has changed quite a bit since, as you asked me, our transition services at that time were, alumni games and stuff like that.
Right, right, gotcha. Okay, so this has been fun. I've added this into my podcast, my new wrinkle of questions. So, what advice would you give to freshman Jay?
Freshman Jay. Oh man, there's a lot to go here. I don't know if I want to tell you everything, but professional advice. I'll give Jay professional advice. Keep expanding your network. Keep expanding your network. I think that's for me specifically. It wasn't, try harder or do other things. I think it was keep expanding your network because I've seen the power of that now as I've moved along in my career. That is what really drives your professional success, and it's personally very beneficial as well. So I think
Yeah, and
that.
then now fast forward, what would only 3 years later, but what advice would you give to senior Jay?
Start thinking about what you're doing after. Start thinking about what you're doing if this football thing doesn't work out, right? Focus on it. Focus on the mindset skills and figure out what you want to do, right? And just go get something. Because I think for me, my senior year, even after that last game, it really didn't hit in that this was my last game, right? It felt destructive. It was, kind of cumbersome on my soul, but it really hits 3 to 6 months after you're done. And so I think if I would go back and tell myself, I would say, get a coach, a business coach, focus on your mindset, transition out, and go find what you want to do. Right? You still need a coach. You still need a coach.
Yeah, well, and you're used to having the coaches right from all those years of playing. So
That's right.
now
Yeah.
now we get to talk about kind of the crux of especially where I talk about your expertise and all. I talk about transition as sports. So talk about you've played all these years. You played starting as a kid, and you've gone through the different sports and played football. Talk about your transition out of sports, like when you knew the time was to hang it up. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So finished my last game. We played University of New Mexico in the New Mexico Bowl, and that was 2007. And we lost. And I remember walking off the field, and it was cumbersome. It was an interesting feeling, but as I said, it really didn't hit in until 3 6 months down the line, and so about 3 6 months after that, it became really daunting. I didn't know what was next, right? I had spent all these years chasing this goal of I want to be a Division I player, and then I want to play in the NFL. I want to win champion. You got micro goals within that, within those elements, and then it all ends, and now that path is completely gone. So for me, about 3 6 months after, it became really hard, and it was something that I struggled with. I couldn't figure out who I was. What do I do? Where do I go? And what's going to get me there? And I mean, I was vulnerable and desperate for a coach at that time, and it was tough. It was tough, man. It was an interesting time of my life, and something I've thought about for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard just all different kinds of, whether it's, transitioning out of college sports or professional sports and some of the journeys that people take. And so, obviously, you kind of went through a period of time of this, struggling with the transition. You mentioned time. So, kind of, I guess once you've kind of found your way out, like what was kind of like the next steps that you took?
Yeah, yeah. So I had this tough time, and I'm battling internally, and I'm battling the world, and trying to figure out everything about myself and everything about this next journey in life, or what am I going to do? How am I going to pick this up? And I found a mentor, and I had a gentleman that started working on my mindset, and that became super powerful for me to get out of kind of this depressed and really anxious state, but put it in terms that an athlete would understand, and then how to transition your drive into another venture, and then how do you architect that next venture, and how do you get there. So I found a mentor, and I got a job. I was looking everywhere for a job, and I got a job in corporate America, and that became that next journey for me. And so I looked at that. I showed up super excited, um, happy, enthusiastic, and I worked my butt off just like an athlete would. I showed up every day early, worked every day late, and I got promoted. And I thought, wow, okay, this is the journey, right? This is my next championship. And that promotion felt, kind of like a little win. It was, okay, I can do this, and I can take this 30-year career and keep going on this journey. And that's the championship, I guess. I'm going to be the CEO. There's the championship. And I constantly had to tell myself that. And I remember talking to my boss one day and asking him, and we're a publicly traded company, like, what's the goal? What are we doing? Where's the championship for this organization, and how can I help that? And those conversations were not the way I intended them to go, and the athletic world wasn't really there. So I ended up leaving that job and met some great people and started a company. To be honest with you, Rob, I didn't know how to start a company. I didn't at that time. It was 15-ish years ago, maybe, and I Googled online. I put in my LLC papers and partnered with some people, and we started a company. And today's Jay, as I look back on that, if I look at that company, I look at a small business. I think, and all the data, and we'll dive into this a bit more, but that really went well, not only because the people were around me, but really the athletic education that I brought into that business. And I think that was really, something that drove me and gave me a reason to wake up every morning, because I knew, okay, I can keep growing this business. I can keep doing this. I can keep doing that. And I can have control of this thing and really, be creative over here. I can have camaraderie over here. I can have develop leaders over here. And the championship is growing this thing, and I've got skin in the game. And then that business sold one day, and that became that game of business for me. I thought, man, this is so cool. Grow companies and then people buy them. That is amazing. So that to me became that game of business. So when I dove into this book, and I dove into everything I'm doing now a few years ago, it's really inspired on that. I had a really tough time coming out of sports. I took one route, which everyone said that was the route to go, corporate America. And then that didn't work out, so I took this other route. And so I take all these things together and really have not only backed it with research, but honed in on everything that went well for me and for a lot of people in these small businesses are really built on those athletic skills.
Okay, and then so let's give some maybe some words of advice to athletes that are facing that transition out of sports. Several words of advice.
Yeah, get yourself a coach, a playbook, and a plan. And those are the three things. Those are the three key ingredients. So coming out of sports, you need that playbook first and foremost, and that coach hopefully will give you that playbook of what are you going to do. Right? What's your goal? Let's set a goal. And that goal doesn't have to be in concrete if you want to be the CEO of a company. But let's set goals so we have new ways, drive this competitive nature and feel like we're on to something.
Let's talk a little bit about one other thing I want to, before we kind of really dig deep, is let's talk about give me your thoughts on the athlete skill set and how that plays into getting into the success that you've had.
When it comes to the athlete skill set, we can look at 10 characteristics of what athletics really drives into a human, and we can drive that down to the neuroscience. So one of the ones I really like talking about, it's called high metacognition, and that is the ability to see the game, right? So as you're growing up and you're playing sports, many times you'll have a coach say, "Hey, see yourself making great plays, see yourself doing this, see yourself doing that." And so you start developing these muscles in your brain. I'm sure, Rob, you had that happening in the sports you were playing. So you start developing these things, and when you can apply that to business, it becomes, and you can apply that to the game of business, and you can see the next play, and you can make decisions that are quicker and faster. That's not something everyone out there has. So that's something we can drive to the science, the neuroscience that athletics, really drives. Creativity. Athletes have high creativity, and we can drive that to their brain. Resiliency, which is a word, a lot of people, I don't like to use the word too much because a lot of people talk about the word resiliency. But you know what? We can drive it to the neuroscience that athletics builds resiliency in humans. Not every human, right? It's still a science project, but it builds resiliency down to the brain, and we can back that also up in the business world. There's a study out there. So CEOs of small companies, so these are 50 to 250 employees. Former athletes that played in college or professional athletes that own those businesses versus non-former athletes are 17% longer tenured. So that to me tells me that that resiliency thing is a real thing. So 17% tenured means you're staying around longer, right? Being a CEO of 50 or 250 people it's a big job. There's a lot of work. So those CEOs are really resilient. And this is the sort of stuff that as you're coming out of sports and you start making it further and further in this world, you start becoming more successful, you'll find that these skills are what are going to take you to the top.
And I think that's great. I mean, I love hearing that because I think a lot of times, especially the athletes that do struggle with transition, they're looking at themselves as the sport or the athlete, not the person. So they get done with the sport and it's like, okay, I'm Jay the football player. What am I going to do next? I'm Rob the runner. Susie the swimmer. Like they're identifying that way. So I think it's important that you realize that you do have that skill set, and people want to hire athletes. And even to your point, I think you've played the game and playing the game of starting, like you said, if you're getting to entrepreneurship, just that drive is going to help you to build successful businesses.
Oh yeah. In entrepreneurship, that plan you come out with, number one, very rarely works, right? Whether it's a product or a service. So being able to evolve and move and be resilient and not see those failures as ultimate failures, but continue to evolve your business and your product is incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, people fail in sports, right? What's the thing in baseball? I always say, you go 3 for 10 and you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. That's right.
As a major leaguer. So that means you failed 7 times, but hey, you still did something right. So let's talk about, for me, everybody, it's been a little while, but a lot of people have written books, and you've written this book, After the Game. So talk a little bit about After the Game and maybe some of the, some of your, we'll do the Reader's Digest version, as they say, but like some of the, summarizing the results and things that you found from athletes transitioning out of sports.
Yeah, and thank you, and thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing that book up. So the book comes out April 2nd. It's coming out through Simon & Schuster. It's on Amazon, Simon & Schuster, and BarnesandNoble.com, and I think a few others. About 3 years ago, I started diving into this book, and I had 15, 16 years of notes of that hard time. It's something I'd always thought about. And 3 years ago, that same mentor who helped me when I came out of sports, I talked to him again, and he said, Jay, make the leap from success to significance. Do something where you can leave your mark on this world and do something that you're passionate about. And I've talked about this for 15 years. How can I help athletes? Like, it was so hard for me. What can I do? So I started diving into all these different playbooks that I had learned in different fields, and how can I support these folks? And then I started diving into the education of athletes and then the problem of athletes. And I think, one of the things that was validating for me, but not the most positive thing, is this identity gap that I was hit with coming out of sports. There's potentially 7.5 million people in America right now that are just like me, that living with that identity gap. And we went through 132 studies and interviewed a ton of former athletes and found that this identity gap is a real thing. And when athletes come out of sports, it's a tough time for the majority of them. Now it's on the barometer of like, how bad is it? So there's a gentleman I talked to who was an NHL player, not a big name, but finished, and he was on one end of the spectrum and tells a story where he's going to take his life and doing some pretty in a pretty bad place. And then other folks will just live by the creed of, oh, my best days are behind me. I'll play pickup basketball or something. And so you've got those two barometers, but the majority of athletes, when that finishes, that's your identity. And that identity is formed in your formative years. So it's a different identity than many out there. And it's one of your root identities that you can form. So for me, at 7, 8 years old, it's something that really formed me through my formative years. And so there's some interesting information there. And so we've got this problem. So I'm writing about this problem. I'm studying this problem. I'm finding that the majority of college and professional athletes suffer from this problem. Okay, what's the solution? Or what is a solution? How can I help folks? And so I dove into the mindset of elite entrepreneurs. And I came up with, I worked with a lot of folks and worked with a Harvard psychologist who's on my team. And we came up with 10 items that are empirically backed and research backed that elite CEOs and entrepreneurs practice in their mindset. Okay, so we take that, and how do we tailor the mindset of an athlete into that? How do we get there? And so we wrote a curriculum. How do we get people from here to here? And so we started writing, and we started, stress testing this and putting it through research and all that. And so we write about the mindset transition. So in the book, we talk about the problem. We talk about these 10 mindset transitions. And then we talk about a very timely opportunity in entrepreneurship, which one I'm a huge fan of, and what I've been doing for many years is called entrepreneurship through acquisition. And so this is for folks that it's a playbook that historically has only been taught at like the elite Ivy League schools, and Stanford is actually born out of Stanford. And buying small businesses and then growing them has been a really high performing asset class, not only for investors, but for those new CEOs. And so I studied that playbook. I did a lot of deals, M&A deals in that playbook. So I was working with buyers and sellers and helping, get new CEOs and buy businesses and do all this. And as I dove into this research, and I already hit you with one stat about athletes being 17% longer tenured. But you know what? There is no better person for this playbook or people or type of people than athletes. And I sat in between a lot of these deals. So, you've got the Harvards, the Stanfords, and these MBA students coming out, and they're 28, 29, 30, 32 years old is the average. And they're buying these companies, they're running them 5 to 7 years, and they're selling them. They're making their money, they're having success, their investors are making money. And I'm looking at the qualities of a small business, what drives it forward. And I'm sitting between all these deals of sellers that have built these businesses and these new buyers, and putting these together and watching how they happen. And I'm just constantly thinking, athletes have this. What do we? You don't need to be a guru at the TI-83 calculator to run a small business. You need to have some knowledge. You need to be smart. You need to be up on your game. But what you did in athletics, those people, at those schools, they can't do. And those I only talked about three of those soft skills that we can drive in sports that are built in you. They didn't learn that. You learned that. And those soft skills are what drive businesses forward. So while you're 17% longer tenured, did you also know that former athletes are 15% higher return on assets? So that means from a small business, when I look at a small business, I value it. You value small businesses on assets. So 15% higher, I'm thinking, holy cow. We've got these people that have been put through the best training in the world, some of the best training in the world, and we're not utilizing it, and they're suffering from all this all these problems. So here's a solution. Here's a solution. Let's get them back in the game. Let's transition their mindset. And let's give them this playbook where they can find success again and get into an opportunity where they're surrounded by a team, coaches, a playbook, and success and your championship, and run that game of business. You can look at a chart and say, hey, I buy it here. I'm going to run it for 5 to 7 years. I'm going to try to sell it here. There's your game. That's just like a college career right there. You redshirt 1 year, work for 4 more, and then and then you sell the thing, and then you're out of there. Take some time off, do it again. So entrepreneurship through acquisition we talk about. And we wrote the book, and I wrote the book. I wanted to write it. I utilized a lot of research and a lot of stories from others as I interviewed folks and did all that. But I also wanted to write it in a way that it would resonate with the widest audience. So I also developed, it's a business parable. So I also developed characters within that, so you could really feel what they're going through, and you can understand, mentally what they're going through as they come out of sports, and then how do they transition, and what are they thinking, how are they feeling, and that way every person out there can put themselves in that shoe or someone else's shoe, and that's that identity. It's purely an athletic identity. So I wanted to really take that approach as well. And it's a hero's journey. So a lot of data, some great playbooks, and a hero's journey. So hopefully you get a little inspired at the end. But for all athletes, high school, college, professional, I wrote it, really just to inspire people and leave a mark on this world for those folks to achieve greatness again.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I think the key there is just I think athletes need to understand that there's help out there, and it sounds like this is going to be a great journey for them to read the book and understand that they can do things. I mean, it sounds like you're covering a lot of stuff we covered today, a ton of different things. I mean, like you said before, we probably talk for hours on all this on this topic. So now, do you also have like do you have a business also that kind of parlays into that, as far as like a training program and stuff like that kind of runs alongside with the book?
Yeah. So I 3 years ago I started writing this book, and I'm here in New York City, and have an M&A firm, and I'm able to leave that and really dive into this book. And then how do I actually help people? How can I consult with people? How can I get them into these playbooks? And so successcoach.com built that out, and built out a curriculum, and built out all these playbooks for these folks with resources, connections to get there, right? So whether it's the business and what I do, whether it's a startup entrepreneur or entrepreneur through acquisition, those are our 2 playbooks right now. We always start with the mindset. So you always go through a mindset course first, and then you either go entrepreneurship through acquisition, or you go through the entrepreneurship course, which is the startup seed course, where you're just trying to get an MVP, start something, and get a great deck, and get funded and invested, and go out there and start the business. And we have an upcoming cohort in April, and a lot of great folks. We have college students all the way up to, I would say, mid-50s that have asked to join and showed interest in our upcoming cohort. And it's an opportune time. It's right now, between now and 2040, we're going through the largest wealth transfer in history. And what that means is there's 10,000 businesses today. I think that was the last stat. But I do know there's 40 trillion in small businesses assets will be sold. So
Wow.
We've got all these businesses looking for new owners. We've got this great pool, 7.5 million folks in the United States that are potentially suffering from this identity gap. And the pool gets filled as people leave every year. People leave. So we've got all this influx of great businesses in every industry. We've got all these great people that are suffering from this problem, but have all the skills to run these businesses. So now's the time to go through that. And what I'm seeing also too, with all this technology and AI and the way the world's changing, is it seems like sellers are coming to the table even earlier in their careers as well, as they're looking to sell their business. Maybe it's just hey, I'm sick of keeping up with this technology stuff, or now's the time. So yeah, really neat time to get involved in this.
That's great. I mean, I definitely encourage people when it comes out to get after the game. And how can people find you, Jay?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is successcoach.com. The book can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, SimonandSchuster.com, also on my website. And yeah, feel free to go there. You can inquire, and we'll get a hold of you right away.
Now, is there the Audible version or not yet?
The Audible version is in the works. It's in the works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to narrate it, or is you have
No.
a guest narrator?
Although I do have a really great voice, I know that. No, I'm joking. No, I'm going to have someone narrate it. I think is the route we're going to go. Because again, I want to, I've gone through this in my mind. I want to touch the widest audience.
Right.
I want to help the most people. And so I want to give it the best voice out there and the best story to tell folks. So
that's great.
We shall see, Rob. Maybe we'll have you on there with some excerpts.
There you go. That'd be awesome. Well, we appreciated all the time today, Jay. You can find us at alumnidirect.com and go to our YouTube channel to watch the videos. We're across all the different podcast networks, and I just encourage people, just especially these athletes, get out there. We just want to inspire you. There's so many good. Every episode we have great people like Jay just kind of sharing their stories, and his very inspirational, like we say, kind of tapping into some of the different things that especially through his book and all that. But get out there and follow the show, listen to the show, and again, thank you so much, everybody. That wraps up another great edition of Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey.